You are listening to Scott H. Silverman's Happy Hour, a podcast released on the first 3 Wednesdays of the month. Family crisis, relationship crisis, addiction crisis, no two crisis situations are the same. They vary by family, individual, and relationship. They can encompass complex family dynamics, emotional distress, anger issues, and entitlements, and often involve substance abuse. This podcast addresses these issues and others surrounding the addiction epidemic currently plaguing this country and the world. There is hope and help.
Are you stuck, scared, or unsure of what to do next? If a situation with a loved one, spouse, or even a child has started to spiral, possibly becoming dangerous or threatening, it's time to seek help. My name is Scott H. Silverman. I help families navigate crisis situations. I'm the person you turn to in order to get you and your loved ones unstuck.
Welcome back to the show. This is Scott H. Silverman's Happy Hour. I'm Scott's co-host, Michael Glenn Moore. Scott, who do we have today for our wonderful podcast?
Well, we have a couple of people who we got away from the pool. We pulled them right inside to speak with us today. So, but that's Southern California. We're very casual here, Michael. So, Michael, how are you doing before we get started? It's good to see you.
I'm doing pretty good. Our weather's kind of weird. It's pretty hot around here. We had 90s something yesterday, so we're sweltering, but fortunately we have central air. So we stay inside.
Very cool. All right. Well, anyway, let me just say hello to everybody and welcome you to the Happy Hour. We're all glad you're here. And we want to remind you, please, if you like what you hear here and you see what you think you need to see, let us know. Go on there, spread the word, share the information, and subscribe and ring a bell or let people know and make sure that the information that we're getting out, you're getting out as well. We want you to know that there's always hope and help. And if you need anything at any time, you can call or text me at area code 619-993-2738, 619-993-2738, or just Google me, Scott H. Silverman, and you will find me. And don't forget, my new book is out, The Opioid Epidemic. You can get it on my website, yourcrisiscoach.com, or on Amazon. Okay, that's the public service announcements that helps pay for this segment. Now, to our special guest today, that smiling, good-looking guy is Dr. Craig Beach. And Craig and I actually met through a third party who is a professional singer, and she felt that we should meet, and we talked, and, we're going to try to pull her on a podcast one day, but I understand she's out of town now on a big show and getting really busy. But Dr. Beach is a guy that spends, it appears to be, as many waking hours helping save lives as anyone I've ever met. And he's here in San Diego, which I'm excited about. And he's now developed this whole new concept. And, he's the guy that, we want to, I'm trying to get him to join us at Confidential Recovery and be one of our, in-house experts, but we can't get to him until we let Stephanie talk today. And Stephanie is the therapeutic brain of the outfit and the programmatic component as well. So what I want to do is just Craig, I'm going to let you introduce yourself and just tell everybody, because, I joke sometimes about people multi-pages resumes, and yours was literally over 10 pages. And when I went through it, I realized we could do a whole podcast on your history and what you've done in the field of saving lives. So if you don't mind, take a couple of minutes and then we'll go to Stephanie, and Stephanie will share who she is, and then we'll get right into the questions.
Thanks, Scott and Michael. Well, Stephanie and I are both so happy to be here today. Thanks for the wonderful work that you both do. I really love the podcast, and congratulations on the book. In terms of some background, Open Mind Health is the company you're referring to, is a company that we started actually this year in the throes of COVID to really address kind of the increased behavioral health and addiction needs that, I don't have to tell you, we're seeing all over the place. And one of the really unique things about our company is that we've pulled together a number of experts that really cover the holistic mind, body, and spirit component of wellness. So we not only have psychiatrists like myself and talk therapists like Stephanie, but we also come at people from areas like the importance of activity, energy healing. You mentioned Juanita Davis, who is our music therapist. So we're really trying to come at the whole person wellness. And we found that that's been really kind of needed and appreciated by people. Most of what we do is telehealth. We do have an office, but of course, during COVID, we've mainly went to that office just to dust off the mail, so to speak. So that was kind of what we've done, and we're going strong. And one of the other unique things about our company is we've come up with what we call wellness tracks. And we have 14 of those featured wellness tracks that are really intended to give our clients a sense of the type of targeted treatment that we can offer to address their specific issues. So there's a bunch of different tracks. They range everywhere from stabilizing symptoms to altering addictions and becoming balanced, to tracks that are targeted for special communities like the Black community, the queer community, Asian and Pacific Islanders, etc. So we're all really excited. Lots going on, and so far things seem to be well received.
So just as a point of clarification, you don't work with old white Jewish people?
Yes, we have a track for that too.
A track for that too. Okay, that's funny. Good answer, Stephanie. I'll call you. So before we jump over,
Can we
Stephanie,
talk?
yes, we can. You know we can. And my people, we need to talk. My goodness, the things that are going on in our community, really, and you know, the level of denial there is so high. But Craig, before we jump over to Stephanie, I want to push you a little bit. I want people to know a little bit about you. I mean, what you just explained is what you're doing. I think that's important, but a little bit about your background and the time that you've put into helping others. I think just a snapshot of that would be helpful, because you're not just a psychiatrist, because I've met a lot of them, and you know, you have and I may get in trouble for this, you have a heart, you have a soul, you understand, you listen, and you know, you're out front. And a lot of them have been solo practitioners forever, and they see people in their home or their office. And, you know, I'm part of the trying to figure out a way to deal with the opioid crisis, and doctors are, you know, historically have been script writers, and I know you're different, and I want people to hear a little bit about your background, if you don't mind.
Well, in terms of my background, I'm originally from Canada, and my exposure and interest in the mental health field initially came from growing up in a small town in Canada. And I actually grew up in a small town that just happened to have the maximum secure forensic psychiatric hospital for the equivalent of the state. So as a young kid, I actually volunteered there and then worked at that place. So that became kind of an exposure to me of kind of all things related to the mind and what people are capable of and did. So it started as kind of a volunteer thing, and then one thing led to another. So that kind of paved the way to me becoming interested in medicine and then psychiatry. And ultimately I ended up doing additional training in forensic psychiatry. So from there, I've worked in some different capacities. I worked, you know, like I mentioned, in maximum secure forensics. I've worked in corrections, and then I've worked for the county psychiatric hospital and the county clinics for many years. And then I've worked in some leadership positions. I was working in academia for a while, and now I'm the CEO and chief medical officer of this company here. So what's really exciting, I'd say, about Open Mind Health in particular is it's really my first opportunity to kind of, you know, bring a team together of experts and kind of craft things and coordinate things in the ways that I've seen and learned over the years that I find to be most helpful and effective for people. So that's one of the most exciting things.
I think I can add a little bit more on Dr. Beach and working with Dr. Beach. We work together in Canada. And I think some of what you're getting to is he has an understanding that's beyond just medicine alone. And I think really incorporates what else does the person need. We worked in an interdisciplinary team of professionals that included people who are peers in Canada. It's people with lived experience who work with the doctors to say, this is what this guy's needing. The doctor has his point, but it's not a hierarchical way of working. It's each has the same equivalent power with a different perspective. And I think that's some of what makes Dr. Beach really different, that he just lives that way.
Oh, thanks, Stephanie. That's so sweet.
Okay. All right. Well, this is Stephanie Robinson. Okay, Stephanie, now it's your turn to talk. So tell us about you and your background, and then maybe how you guys have connected. That would be helpful.
Sure. I'm Stephanie Robinson. I am the Chief of Quality and Client Experience with Open Mind Health. I'm also a psychotherapist and executive and life coach. I'm from Canada. I still live in Canada. And my work has evolved from personal lived experience. I have a brother who has schizophrenia. I worked in addictions. I had a friend that I had lost to heroin addiction. And so it was, trying to support her along the way while setting boundaries and trying to figure out it shouldn't have to hurt this bad. That led me into doing trauma work and work with violence against women. I was a foster parent, raised a bunch of foster kids. That led me then to be working in significant mental health, and I worked on ACT teams. And then Dr. Beach and I developed a FACT team together, which is a flexible assertive community treatment program that we wrote the standards for in Ontario together. So we've been working together for a long time that way. I have also worked in women's prisons, so a lot with violence against women issues, abuse, trauma, and addictions.
Awesome. So let's jump right into it. So Stephanie and Dr. Beach, and I'll let Stephanie, I'm going to direct them to you because I know it's been made clear to me before we started, you were the brains in the outfit, and we'll defer to the doctor whenever we need some sort of a, medical support piece. So how has COVID-19 affected our mental health and addictions from your experience?
Yeah, I think you can start with that.
Well, I mean, that actually is a question I could probably handle. So I think
by the way, I know you can handle all of these, but I think I want you guys to, I want to hear from both of you today, because I think the fact that you're together speaks volumes again about where we're heading and what we're trying to do to help people. Because I think I've learned one size does not fit all. I've also learned, working with veterans, that the PTSD that's come into the fold, the family untreated trauma that are issues. And, as a guy in long-term recovery, I can continue to see this relapse and recidivism chronically now, even in my own home group. And I think we're losing so many people right now. Just in San Diego, as you may or may not know, 400% increase in the opioid overdose. And a lot of it's coming from the counterfeit medication, which really has nothing to do with a doctor prescribing something or someone even taking Oxycontin out of their parents' medicine cabinet. It's kids get a hold of things that say one thing and it's cut with fentanyl usually. And what happens is they accidentally overdose. So I think what we're talking about today is so important. And again, I'm going to put another plug in. I want to work with you guys, and I'm putting it in video and audio right now, because I think that the skill set you have, we don't. We're an outpatient program. And when people need a higher level of care, we want to make sure that we've got it there. And we're trying to do, I think, similar things, but your expertise is so different than mine, but complements everything we do in the therapeutic environment. And to reduce recidivism, we're going to have to find ways to be more effective, in my opinion, on how we listen to people and how we help people. So that being said, go ahead, Doc.
Yeah, so I think it goes without saying, we've already talked about collaborating, and we'd love to do that, and of course intend to do that. In terms of the COVID impacts, it may also go without saying, along with the COVID pandemic, there's essentially what you can call a mental health and substance use crisis. And essentially everything that we know of in terms of emotional and mental health conditions, and most of the societal problems that we deal with, have also gone up, and not in a good way. So ranging from health anxiety and worry, to isolation and loneliness, to depression, to substance use, which you mentioned, and addiction, to health concerns, particularly people who have underlying health issues or immunologic issues, to domestic violence. People are spending a lot more time together, and then tragically to suicide, which we're also, of course, there's an uprise in that as well.
Okay. So explain the resilience and adaptive coping and why they are so important in our mental wellness. Who wants to take that one?
Well, I can start. So psychological resilience, I think resilience is probably a term that many have heard of, but may not have had it kind of spelled out. And there's different ways to think of it. But the way I find helpful to think of it is to have resilience is to have armor against adversity. We all deal with adversity in life. Life inevitably is going to throw us different punches, and basically we can differ in how well equipped we are to deal with those blows along the way. So people who are more resilient or psychologically resilient have more armor, or they have a better buffer to deal with adversity when it comes along.
I think I'll add to that. It's not, you think about Darwin, and he would say, it's the survival of the fittest. And I think what we want to talk about is that it isn't the strongest or the smartest, it's the most adaptable to change. And I think that sort of captures what resilience is. And we look at more sort of adaptive coping strategies as opposed to passive coping strategies. So active versus passive. Passive would be avoidance, hiding, withdrawing, isolating, those kinds of things, versus active coping, which would be reaching out, being open-minded. And I think you might want to talk about being open-minded. That's the name of the business.
Yeah. So open-minded, one of the impetus for calling our company Open Mind Health was really getting at what we view as the importance of staying open-minded. And one of the traits of people who are more resilient is they tend to be more open-minded in contrast to being more closed-minded. So there's many characteristics of being open-minded, but it's basically includes the abilities to tolerate uncertainty, sit in the gray as opposed to needing black and white, engage in more lateral thinking, entertain more options, and basically get more comfortable in the uncomfortable, if you will, as opposed to someone who's more closed-minded. They don't have the same solution set available to them because they're not as open. Kind of like when you're in that anxious mode, right? You're kind of get that pinpoint vision and you're not able to think as clearly. And when you're stressed, you don't have the same ability to think laterally and your solution space isn't as open. And so you're not as creative either, which is something I know that Stephanie has been talking about lately in some of the work we've been doing.
So why are some individuals more resilient than others? What creates that resilience in some that doesn't exist in others?
I think you can look at it in a bunch of different ways. There is the sort of nature versus nurture old argument. There's a lot of people who say children, by the nature of being children, are more resilient, and that's actually not true. Resilience is a skill that can be learned. It can be optimized, and it can be squashed in people as you accumulate a various, life is hard on people and it can kick your ass sometimes. Are we allowed to say that? So I
guess so.
Just did. Yeah. So I think, it can develop and it can be taught, and it can be eradicated if we're not continuing to work on those skills.
Okay. So how does a lower resiliency increase addiction?
So I think a lower resiliency is if you look at addiction as a coping mechanism. So if people are overwhelmed and needing to reduce their anxiety, they may start start one way and take on for another reason. It may also be a way of sort of seeking that safety in things, or escaping. So again, you think about active and passive coping styles. It can be used as either an active or a passive coping style.
Right.
It can be used when we're overwhelmed or when we're bored and looking to be activated.
Yeah, some of the personality factors that sometimes lead to people using include problems tolerating boredom, being sensitive to anxiety, prone to depression, fun seeking. Those are certainly during COVID. I mean, things that people have really struggled with, right? Sitting with themselves and being isolated, and not having, the same options or same life that they're used to and desire.
Yeah. So a question I get a lot from parents is, why is my child using? Why are they abusing? Why do they need this kind of self-medication? Why are they, smoking marijuana? Why are they vaping? Why are my children not listening to me when I've told them they need to stop? So how would you respond to a parent who asks that question? Why is my child doing this? This usually self-medicating, for example.
Yeah, and I don't know that it's necessarily a quick answer like that. I think it's nice of you to ask me, but have you asked your child? That's the first question that I'd ask is what's their understanding of why they're doing it? And I think addiction, again, I think I said it before, it starts for one reason and can take over for another. And I think if you can get to the roots of that, each person, there's a slightly different reason why it happens. More so than that, I mean, we spent some time in LA and in Skid Row recently. And I think that speaks to me. We've traveled a lot. That speaks to me about some of the societal implications of why addiction starts. And I think that's another area that, there's the individual mental health, but there's also the societal mental health that we've got to consider too.
I mean, as part of that, it just makes me think, one of the things we really try to do at Open Mind Health that I think differentiates some of the treatment out there is we really try wherever possible to get to the, what we call the root causes of the issues. So in the case of addiction, I'm thinking of kind of the mind, body, soul, and behavioral roots of addiction. So it could really vary person to person, but I think it is key to really take an individualized approach and kind of target that assessment and treatment towards, whatever's at the root causes.
So let me ask just for clarity. So is a resiliency deficiency, I think I heard you say, Stephanie, that's something that can be developed kind of like muscle memory.
Absolutely.
One probably needs to understand what the lack of resiliency is. I think of them as tools that we try to give people, and obviously putting them in terminology that with techniques and curriculum and support, because the consistency of what I see on interventions and with family navigating is the parent has no skills whatsoever, obviously, because who knows these things unless they know these things to deal with it. And I'm simply kind of labeling right now self-medication, but generally speaking, not generally, probably all the time, once you remove the anesthesia, the underlying mental health issues, the untreated trauma, the catastrophic events, because most parents don't ask that question. I love you. I'm concerned. What they're angry about and frustrated about is they're watching their child to some degree potentially poison themselves very slowly and some very quickly. And it's I get the question all the time. And you're right. Somebody says to me, on a Friday, usually they call 5 o'clock. I've got to get my son somewhere tonight, because they've been living with months and months, and then maybe there was a potential, accidental overdose, and they survived. They want to do something with it, and I assure them that there's no quick fix. There is a process, but until a professional does an assessment and there's a plan, we can't start to help anybody. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I think it's also the skills resilience of a family, and oftentimes we do what we think is the right thing. We do all the right things for all the wrong reasons, or all the wrong things for all the right reasons. I think it's all the wrong things for all the right reasons is how that saying goes. I think about my son, and he was 16, and I got him into counseling, and the counselor spent more time with me as a mother than she did with him. And after I said, "Oh, you're doing so great. Counseling really worked." He said, "Yeah, you changed." I think some of that's pretty interesting. And I think it's the parents need the support. They're watching their children suffering, and they want to run right in and save the day. And that's not necessarily what's going to build the resilience in their child either.
So what do we tell? What do we give me a nugget that we can give a parent? And I know it's difficult, but and I'm getting asked more and more now that my book is out. Yeah, you talk about the opioid epidemic. That's the name of your book, and we're seeing people overdose, and there's drugs everywhere. But what's the solution? And that's not an easy question to take and then give a simple answer to, because again, if someone's predisposed and they do suffer from this disease of addiction, it's like diabetes. Not everybody gets it. Some people do, but how we treat it is important. But more importantly, not only the treatment side of it, but the recovery, the continuum of care, and staying with somebody, being tethered and have them connected for a long period of time, because there's no vaccine for addiction. There's no vaccine for mental health issues or depression or anxiety. And when you hear about people losing their life at the age we had someone here in San Diego, I don't think it's actually hit the main news yet, but it's common knowledge, and those of us that are connected, 13 years old. 13 years old. And it was defined as an accidental death as of right now. And 2 weeks prior to that, there was a 15-year-old in Coronado, and that's a bedroom community that, most everybody there has everything they want or need or can go get it. So it doesn't have a zip code that it anchors itself in. But recently we've had overdoses in the county jail. We've had overdoses in the homeless community. And, if you want to call that a community, but most people don't choose to be there, but there are many who do. And I'm tracking what's going on in Skid Row, and I'm watching what's happening here in this community. And as a prior homeless provider, they're a target for anybody who's creating anything mood altering. And I want to be able to find more effective ways to try to give the family at least a safety net where they can kind of breathe, kind of like the oxygen mask that comes down from a plane, so you can breathe until you get down to a place where you can actually breathe on your own. So how do we help families? How do we do that?
I mean, I'm really glad that you brought up the vaccine and you just mentioned oxygen. And I think the reason Stephanie and I really wanted to talk about adversity and psychological resilience is that in some ways, I think that psychological resilience you could view as almost the vaccine for life, to prepare you for the reality that most people don't have a very easy life, that life's not all, butterflies and lollipops. That's kind of the reality of most people's lives. And some of the things that we're talking about here, I mean, unfortunately, a lot of times by the time we're approached, there's significant strain and problems. There's even crisis. Ideally, what you'd want to do is you'd want to start working on these things proactively and preventatively, because that's really what's going to, determine when, each of us is handed the same stressor, where we're at in terms of our ability to deal with that stressor is some of these things that we're talking about, like resilience. And that comes down to things like, how flexible and open-minded we're able to be, how much we're able to, think creatively, how we attach meaning to things, how do we find meaning in adversity, etc.
How do we stay out of our heads and in our bodies? So some of the yoga and energy healing and things like that, we have a lot of people who cope in all kinds of different ways, but building that resilience from early in the child, in the family, in society, social connections. I mean, I think COVID taught us that. We were able to reconnect with people as that was a resilience coping strategy. We found ways to get in touch with family over Zoom, or, reach back to somebody that you hadn't talked to for a while to check in on them. But social connection and emotions and meaning making, expressing emotions through creativity, things like that.
You say, stay out of your mind. I like, one of my favorite sayings is, my mind is like a bad neighborhood. I try not to go there alone,
Yeah.
unescorted. So tell me, share a couple of holistic practices, some tools right now that people could take from this segment that would be helpful until they get them to a support professional that can really help, teach the kind of thing. And I love the word resiliency. How long, Craig, how long have you been using that word? That word, or the concept of building resiliency? Because I think it's a great way of framing it, and it's a little opaque for someone who, when you start to think about the word, it's kind of like denial. What is denial? And when you talk to families about that. But I love the word, and when I read it with your notes and I thought about it and I listened to you talk about it, I'm going to use it as a great tool, because I think building resilience, and I like the term personally, muscle memory, because that's what it is. It's practice. It's just like, it's like Toll House cookies.
Right.
You can make Toll House cookies. I have every week, not every week, but you could do it every week for a year. And I promise, if your butter isn't the same temperature and your brown sugar isn't this and your flour isn't, and then they say there's 250 different versions of the basic recipe of Toll House cookies. So how do we share some tools that a family can listen and go, or realize that what it is they may need to do next probably isn't best for them to do next, but actually to seek the professional support that, because I like the analogy of, if your car breaks down on the freeway, most people don't open their phone and go to YouTube. They call AAA, or they call their towing company, or they call their mechanic, because that's what they're an expert at. For you guys, your pool pump breaks down. Do you go out and try to fix it? You might once. And yeah, well, I wasn't pointing the finger, but clearly that's not something we would do ourselves, because it requires a level of experience and expertise. So back to what can we tell families? This is A, B, or C, or this is 1, 2, 3. Let them know.
And I think that's a great question for Stephanie. Like, how would someone know that they're at a point where it's gone beyond kind of something you deal with within your family alone, and you're over your head and you need more support?
Mm-hmm. And I think some of what keeps people continuing to stay within instead of reaching out is shame. Also, that inability to help seek is help seeking is a resilient strategy. I think it's important. Self-awareness too. We don't always know when we're over our head. We keep treading water and hoping it's going to get better, or we blame ourselves and think, well, it's all my fault. There's a lot of defeatist ways of looking at it. I like that you talk about muscle memory, because I talk to people often about resilience is also like building core strength. So a lot of people who are into fitness but aren't really, processing their emotions, they kind of get it. Like, if I go to the gym and I pump these weights, I'll do better. But you've seen those guys with the big arms and skinny legs and no core strength. They're missing some of the balance in all of that, right? So, for families and for people, working on that core strength and building those core pieces that help you get to the next level, and self-awareness, building that self-awareness is core strength.
Yeah. And, most people would probably, and gym owners will tell you prior to COVID, 92% or something of the people that join a gym never go. They just, they get to a point and they look down and they can't see their feet. And that's just my own personal experience. And I go, I got to do something, they go online and do this and do that. And my wife now wants that thing with the mirror, where you can exercise with the mirror. And I said, that's a lot of money. Let's just go for walks every day and maybe make some little adjustments in what we eat after 6 o'clock at night. And no one wants to do that. And, we're seriously thinking about maybe we need to bring an expert in. I just personally hired an executive coach, because as a coach, I want to raise the bar. So I'm talking to somebody who is a lot more experienced than I am, and they're out of my head and they're not part of my, current nuclear family, who generally, like you said, they want to love you to wellness, but that works to a certain point. So good suggestion. So let me ask you this. You've developed this customized treatment approach branded wellness tracks. Tell us about the tracks. And so when somebody calls you, and we want to be sure and get your information so they can, because, I would assume that you can do things by phone, online, telehealth. And of course, if someone's in San Diego, they can come see you or see me, and we can call you and we can work together with a family. But tell us about the tracks. How's that work?
Yeah, so all the details are on the website, openmindhealth.com. So I'll be brief here. I don't want to bore people with details that they don't want, but the bottom line is that we've developed membership plans so that people can kind of hopefully make a commitment to their mental wellness. And as part of that membership plan, we offer what I call kind of a menu or a smorgasbord of options. And each person's different. And so initially, when a client calls us up, we try to get a sense of what they're going through or what they might want support with. And then sometimes we have a sense of what might be most helpful, but oftentimes that requires much more assessment. So the first, typically several sessions up to a month, is usually working with a therapist or a provider, really kind of going deeper in those key areas to understand it better, and then what might be required. So we call that the assessment phase. And then from there, the client and the provider work together, and the client arrives at which of our wellness track or tracks might be most appropriate. And a lot of times, based on the complex nature of people and their issues, there may be several tracks that are relevant, but one or two will stand out. And sometimes based on where people are at and what they're going through and their priorities. So for example, if someone's on the cusp of a divorce, our communication wellness track might be very important, which is focused specifically on relationship and couples work. Other people, we have a lot of people who have ADHD, which is also linked to addiction. So we have a track on focus and flourish. As I mentioned, we have one on addiction and becoming balanced. We have some people who are very symptomatic, for example, in a manic episode, or who have decompensated because they're off their medicines and have schizophrenia. So there, the work is really focused initially on stabilizing the person from, more of a medication perspective. And then depending on the person, they can go from one track to the next. And I know Stephanie can speak to this more. And then we have people, Stephanie's working within the queer community, working with a lot of people. And in our special tracks, one of the things I've noticed is that oftentimes the traumas may be different, but the shame that can be based on a lot of people's lives is pretty consistent. It's same script, different cast is one of the things we're noticing. So even though our tracks may apply, to different populations, and there's certainly some benefits within groups to people kind of working together, but there's certainly some consistencies across people as well.
think what the tracks help us do also is prioritize what's most important to the person who's coming forward. So it's kind of a negotiation between you and your doctor and your therapist and your group to say what's most important for you to work on. And here's some of the things that I'm seeing might be in the way of if that's your priority. And so you negotiate what the priorities would be. So somebody may say, I really want to work on my ability to communicate, but you really see that their addiction is in front of a lot of that. And so you'd say, let's work on both then. Let's go both those tracks.
And the reason we came up with the wellness tracks is that the whole concept of mental wellness and mental health care can be very mysterious and opaque to people. And so people, I think, fear accessing treatment. They don't really know what treatment is. And then they fear that if I start, when's it going to end? So really by being kind of evidence-based in our approaches, we very much have been able to, for some people have, 4 or 5 or 6 sessions, and that can complete their therapy because it's very targeted. We've worked with people with specific kind of phobias or fears or kind of life executive coaching type of issues where they may do 1 or 2 sessions of coaching specifically targeted, for example, to an upcoming I have an upcoming interview next Wednesday. I'm really concerned about this. It's targeted work focused on that interview on Wednesday.
I think one of the things we say a lot is it's not fashion therapy. It's therapy you're gonna do some work, and it's not always going to be comfortable, but you're going to start to feel better.
No, I agree. I love that. In my first book, I talk about learning how to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, because that tends to be when we're a little out of our head and we're a little bit more open to potentially hearing the message. So it sounds like it's possible for someone to come to you and start in one track, stabilize what's been going on. I call it the forest fire that's trying to be addressed by a squirt gun, which is kind of what I think the county does with the level of issues we have in our community. Is they're coming at a forest fire with a squirt gun, and that just doesn't work. It may make people feel good, those with the squirt gun, because they think they're doing something, but the fire is so big, we're really not making systemic change or creating that. And then we haven't, I don't think we've used the word yet. The word stigma, surrounds a ton of different things that we've talked about today, just accessing, making that call and going forward. So as our time's running out, let me ask you a question. What have we not asked you today that we should? Meaning, what do you really want us to know that we haven't actually talked about that you'd like to leave, in our podcast today? What is it we haven't asked you that we should know?
I mean, there's nothing I was expecting you to ask me that you haven't, but I think I just want to reiterate, oftentimes people tend to be quite reactive with respect to their mental health, and they wait until a situation has arisen, or they're in the throes of a crisis, or there's a tragedy, or they've experienced some acute trauma, or they're at a breaking point. And we encourage those people to get help. But what would be preferable is if people could be a little bit more proactive and really understand that mental health and wellness is a core component of our overall wellness. And even as young children, as we're parenting our children, that we're talking about the importance of maintaining mental wellness and taking care of your mental health. And as we mentioned today, kind of thinking of building that armor or that buffer to prepare us for life's inevitable adversities. And that's why we wanted to talk about, adversity and kind of psychological resilience as being the toolkit or the armor or the buffer, or the vaccine, if you want to talk about it in COVID language. It's the potential vaccine, if you will, of strategies that you can come up with to best equip yourself when life hands you whatever cards it does.
And some of that resilience, I think I want people to know it doesn't have to hurt so bad. Some of the things we talk about in therapy is how to play and how to not take yourself so seriously, and how to be a more authentic person and trip over your words and fumble into a room, and it's okay.
Yeah, we're really.
Yeah,
I was just going to say, really getting at. A lot of times people will come to therapy and they come to therapy because they're worried that they're not like other people, or they don't fit in, or they're being judged, or they feel different. And the therapy is really trying to help people to see that that's a good thing. It's a good thing to be different. You should celebrate that. And really, we all just want to, be our best self and, express ourselves authentically, who we genuinely are as people. So your kind of whole, presenting problems, if you will, of going to therapy can be very differently viewed after therapy, because the things that were bothering you, you're able to put into a different perspective. It's opened your mind, if you will. So, we like to think of kind of open mind health as kind of, armor to help people be open-minded.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. I like that. So share your contact information again, if you would, with us. And I'm going to turn it over to Michael, because he usually has the best question of the podcast. So contact info again, please. How do they reach you?
Our phone number is 1-855-550-MIND or 6463. Website is openmindhealth.com. And the best email to reach us with any questions, or if you want to learn more about our program, is info@openmindhealth.com. Got it.
Michael, what do you got for us today?
Well, I was just wondering, I guess something I'm not really clear on. Say, I'm bipolar, so I have that issue to deal with, and I see a therapist and a psychiatrist, often. If I come to you with that, say I don't have a therapist and I don't have a psychiatrist, what do you provide? I know you provide therapy, but is there some type of psychiatry and medical, like say prescription aspect of the website?
That's great. I'm so glad you asked that, Michael. So one of the relatively unique areas of our practice is that we do combine, kind of, as I mentioned, the holistic care. So everything from psychiatry to talk therapy to music therapy, energy healing, Reiki, et cetera. So bipolar disorder is a good example. Obviously, as you'll know, there are people who will come to get mental health care who are quite unstable in terms of their symptoms and may need to be placed on medications or may need adjustments in their medication. So for those people, seeing a psychiatrist would be typically the number one priority. And that would be kind of where they would start. And then oftentimes we'll see people who are on meds and then they'll become stable after there's been some adjustments to their meds. And either afterwards or simultaneously, they'll work with one of our therapists or coaches, and they may address various issues that anyone without bipolar would deal with. I mean, some of the things that commonly we see people, and you probably know better than we do, is we see people needing a lot of structure and support, the importance of kind of sleep, a predictable schedule. So the psychiatrist may be able to work with the meds, but the kind of day-to-day supports and tips to help someone with their functioning is often best accomplished through therapy and coaching.
And the nice thing with us as well is that you've got the therapists that are speaking with the psychiatrist. So there's a team-based approach. It's a communication, because we're all under the same sort of roof. We also have integrative medicine. So our psychiatrists may speak a lot more about nutrition and how some of those things might help as well. So it's not just throwing meds at it when you come to us. There's a lot more to it.
Yeah, the medication aspect took a long time for me to get adjusted to. So I know that's not something that you can deal with quickly. A lot of times it may take months and months or even years to get that right cocktail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a lot of times people will come thinking that they need one thing, but find out that they need something different or an additional thing. So it's not uncommon that someone will come with, ADHD or bipolar disorder and know that they need to have, a medication evaluation. But after, I see that person, it's very clear that it's a lot more complex than that. And there's additional things that would potentially help as much or even more than medication. There was someone, Stephanie and I we're talking about today, who we were really agreeing could benefit from energy healing and yoga. There's been many cases where I've referred patients who came to me for quote unquote meds, but they're now doing therapy or coaching. So that's one of the
meds, actually.
There have been people who come, we put them on meds, they've gotten better, we've got them off the meds while they were doing the therapy because the benefits from the therapy were so great that they no longer needed the meds. I mean, that's not typically as true for bipolar disorder, which we were discussing, but it can be true for some people who are, experiencing acute stressor, going through some grief, or, had an acute trauma.
Okay. So who's got the quote for the week?
I think we've done a bunch of quotes all the way through.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think Tupac has one of my favorite quotes. You can analyze, overanalyze for months, years, or you can just leave it on the floor and move that on. And I didn't do this quote right, but
I've never heard that one before.
you have another one?
No, I was just thinking of, the Darwin one you took from me. I was going to use that one related to psychological adversity. But another one I'm thinking of is around meaning. And I know a lot of people are starving for finding meaning in things, and Viktor Frankl's coming to mind.
Okay, is that it?